All right, Patrick. Joe Kapp, one of the great. I think even you could even say unheralded in some ways figures in Vikings history. He was the starting quarterback from 1967 through 69. He quarterbacked the Vikings to a Super Bowl, and he passed away earlier this week at the age of 85 years old. So I'm sure you have a better chance of remembering Joe Kapp than we do. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on him.
Well, I never actually covered him. I got to tell you that. I was covering high schools when he was here, but I did obviously know about him. I was there when he threw the 7 touchdown passes against the Baltimore Colts in the game 2 of 1969. And he kind of all the things. If there had been a Love Boat in 1969, we would have laughed about it because we would have had Joe Kapp there and Lonnie Warwick. One of their famous stories is that Joe Kapp and Lonnie Warwick, who was the linebacker, got in a fight because who was trying to take responsibility for the defeat. Warwick was trying to blame the defense and Kapp was trying to blame the offense. They were such great guys that they were fighting over their own willingness to take credit for defeats. That's the kind of image that they. Now you got to remember they had Sid covering them, who covered up everything, and then you had Klobuchar, who was creating this theme that went through the whole team of these hard-nosed, hard-drinking, wonderful, devoted Vikings. And Kapp was the leader of that crew, and also a complete loose cannon. In truth, he was a loose cannon, the whole Tequila Joe stuff. But he's also not very bright. He he had the privilege of playing with the greatest defense ever, right? I mean, you look at the 1971, Alan Page was the MVP of the league as a defensive tackle.
Yeah.
He was the MVP of the league. That defense gave up 130 points. He could have stayed here and been the quarterback and gone to another Super Bowl or two, but he got this 80-some-year-old lawyer, John Elliott Cook, that convinced him he could become a free agent if he didn't sign his contract. So he was gone in 1970. He ended up signing with the Patriots in October. They were a terrible team. He was in no shape to play quarterback. He was out of the league by 1971.
Yeah, that's amazing. He goes from throwing 7 touchdown passes in a game and going to a Super Bowl to out of the league less than 2 years later.
Yeah, because they were trying to beat the free agent. They were trying to create free agency. They were trying to beat the system. And the NFL was no different then than it is now. The league, Pete Rozelle basically blackballed this guy, and he wasn't. The other thing is he was never a marksman as a passer or anything. And when he played in the full season of '68, he had 10 touchdowns and 17 interceptions. Yeah. His quarterback rating was 58.5. It was threw for 1,600 yards in 14 games, but he had something. He was with that defense and with that. Once in a while, they'd explode, and he'd throw these duck passes, and people jump up and catch him. And he was the right guy for the right time, and he could have been that guy again for 3-4 years, and he just thought he could go out and get rich. He thought people were gonna fight for his services because he was such a great quarterback, and everybody knew he was just a Vikings quarterback. The Vikings had. Okay, Joe, you threw an interception and you left them have the ball at the 20-yard line, but by the time the series was over, they were back at the 35 because Alan Page had sacked 2 guys. So, he was playing with this fantastic defense, and he just screwed it up. And he was he went to Cal later on. He took Cal to the Rose Bowl. Then he won a Grey Cup or 2 up in Canada, or he went to the Grey Cup finals anyway. And then he went back to Cal later on as their head coach. Somebody told me this story. about they had a friend from San Diego who went up there to be an assistant with him, and 2 months later the guy was back. They said, "Why are you back?" He said, "Because I asked Joe what was our practice plan." He said, "We don't have one."
Oh.
Well, just it was just all off the cuff, and it exploded, and he broke every rule known to man, and he was a terrible coach. But I got to sit with him 2, 3 times when he came back for various events, and he was a character. There's no doubt about it, and he was beloved. It was, as I said in my column, and I've said it a couple of times, we appreciated Tarkington. We loved Joe Kapp. Everybody loved Joe Kapp, even though he turned on him and basically ruined the 70 and 71 season because they didn't have a good quarterback until they brought Tarkington back. So
yeah, it's funny. I would say so. We get we every Friday we do Feedback Friday on Purple Daily, Pat, where we just take emails from people and answer. So we have taken in thousands of emails from people over the 2 or 3 years, right? I can't think of more than 3 or 4 odes to Fran Tarkenton. I can count. Yeah. We have an ode to Joe Kapp. Well, he passed away this week. That's why.
Yeah, right.
But I could count 50 to 100 odes to Joe Kapp just from older generation Vikings fans that felt the connection to him.
They did. I mean, it was he was much bigger than his performance. That's in the fan reaction. Much bigger than his performance. But I was there. The reaction, I probably overdid it a little in my column, but I said that 7 touchdown pass game, because 68, they were 8-6, and they weren't a big machine. They went to the playoffs, and there was strong Viking interest, but somehow that 7 touchdown pass game, after they'd lost their opener at Tarkington, that 7 touchdown pass game just lifted the Viking phenomenon to a degree, and then it was the start of a 12-game winning streak too, which also helps. So that was when they, he was the man when they became the Vikings, right. the Warriors of the North. But here's what people forget is this: 67, Bud comes in to replace Van Brocklin, who was a raving idiot. But Bud comes in, he goes 3-8-3. When our motto was tie one for Bud. That was, he was getting beat by the, I think it was the Rams 34-0. He kicked a field goal late in the game. They said, "Bud, why'd you kick a field goal?" He says, "I didn't want to get shut out." So we were not all in on, he was played for the Gophers, but so what? We were not all in on 83. 67. We weren't all in on Bud.
Did Bud like Kapp or tolerate Kapp?
There are rumors that he did not like him, but I don't know. The thing about Bud was, if you could play, you could pretty much get away with anything. Carl Eller had some bad habits back then. Never played every game. Alan Page went to law school and didn't show up for training camp for about 5 years. Bud let him do it. Then when he couldn't, when his play started going, then Bud got rid of him. Jim Marshall would have to only practice like the morning practices or something like that because they could play. When Bud's team would go back home on Friday nights, like for an exhibition game, he wouldn't let them leave till 4:00 in the afternoon. Then they could drive their own cars, but he didn't want them to go earlier in the day because he knew they'd go find some ladies and raise hell. And because the games didn't kick off till 8:00 then. Jim Marshall would you could start your car and leave after Jim Marshall shot his gun off up in the air as the starting pistol, and a real gun. He shot his, at 4:30 in the afternoon. They could get away with anything with Bud if they could play. Plus, you got to remember the other thing. He had the same guys every year, the same. Jim Marshall was his defensive end from 1961 to 1979.
It's amazing.
It's
Mick Tingelhoff was the center for
center for the whole
20
time.
20 years.
Yes, it was the defense. about 72, they bad drafted Matt Blair and Freddie McNeil, same draft. And then they slowly got rid of Roy Winston and Wally Hilgenberg, but he liked the guys that did what he wanted them to do, right? The guys that he could rely on, even more than Belichick in those early years when he had the same old linebackers who wouldn't really great players anymore. But Cap, I talked to Alan Page on when Cap died Friday, I guess. And if there was one guy in the world who wouldn't have liked that whole shtick, that whole Mexican Tequila Joe blah shtick, it would have been Page, because Page is a serious guy. But Page loved him. Page says, he said all he cared about was winning games. He didn't know what his stats were when a game was over. He said all he cared about was winning games, which is 180 degrees opposite of Francis. Francis loved to win, wanted to win, and he wanted Francis to get a lot of credit for it too. So
the Vikings have had some quarterbacks in their recent and far past history that love to put up stats, maybe first and foremost. And
yes, that's true. But Cap did not, and that one game he threw 7 touchdown passes. I think he only had like 21 for the year or someday.
It was 19. He had 19 for the year.
19. He had 7 in his first game. Quazzo played the first game at New York. So that kind of indicated that Bud might not have been in love with him, because Cap had started the whole 68 season, and then he starts Quazzo in the opener. But they gave up 2 number 1s for Gary Quazzo to the New Orleans Saints after they traded Tarkington. So Jim Finks gets a lot of credit, but he wasn't flawless. He gave up 2 number 1s to New Orleans for Quazzo. Now you got to remember that draft choices weren't valued back then.
Judd, if there was a Purple Daily back 60 years ago, Judd would have been calling for heads.
Well, the Tarkington trade was good though. They got a ton from the Giants, so.
It was great. Oh yeah, that was the Tarkington trade made that defense and made a lot out of Clinton Jones, Gene Washington. It was fantastic. They went to Michigan State to get players too, which was good back then, because Michigan State was paying more than the NFL back then with their players. So.
Hey, I want to give you guys, Judd and Patrick here. I want to give you the floor here to maybe officially apologize to Max Kepler for all of the negative things you've been spewing about him. Now that he's the Twins' hottest hitter, he's batting second. Another home run last night, 6 home runs. He had 9 all of last year. So
yeah, he looks better. He looks better. But you would have had a better chance against Hader in the 10th inning.
Fair point.
That's not fair to let Max bat against Hader in that situation.
Stick your elbow out. Just stick your elbow out.
Oh no, dude, that would hurt you way too much.
That would really hurt. No, Max, he's been better. I mean, he's going to hit 235 when the year's over, but he's been better. And but having Kirilloff helps too. That kid can hit. I hope he can stay healthy, because he can. He hung in there and hit a rocket down the right field line. So, and they win a ball game. But man, scoring runs is hard, isn't it? Wow.
Joey Gallo is unplayable right now at the plate.
Yeah, well,
his at-bats are just nothing.
This is the Joey Gallo experience. Yeah. For a month, he will be unplayable, and then he'll carry you for 3 weeks. And
I hope we see that.
Well, you did already.
Yeah, that's the trouble. You probably saw the best of him, but it is. They were, pulling the plug on Miranda. They want, Miranda. If he's trying to figure out why he's in St. Paul, look at film of him playing. Look at the tape of yourself playing third base. That's his biggest problem, really. I mean, I thought maybe he saved himself by getting that base hit on Tuesday night, only running, but I thought maybe he saved himself. But then he butchered a couple of balls later that night, and that was it. They can't stand to watch that. He's not an athlete. He's a hitter. He's not an athlete. He doesn't no speed and no reactions, and it's going to be hard for him as long as Buxton's the DH. I don't know what are you going to do with him, because you got You got Reusse Lewis coming. You got Farmer here. You might have to, if Palapa stays, you got to find a place for that Julian kid to play. He's we might have seen the last of Jose, but boy, Lopez was good last night. So, and Louis fell under 400, so he's down to 398. So,
oh my God, what a slump!
So Patrick, when's the last time that we have seen this complete of starting pitching from this team?
Well, if Louis Varland is going to be good,
right,
long time ago. I'd have to go back and look, but 5 deep, a competitive 5 deep. I don't know what when they were good, and they had good pitching around. Even Santana and Liriano, when you had them at the top, the bottom.
You had Loesch at the bottom, and
yeah, and Loesch was good at times, though, right? I mean, there's a year you can find a year when they had Joe Mays, Eric Milton. When Joe Mays was healthy, Eric Milton was healthy.
Radke.
Who else was around then?
You had Radke, and then there might have been a partial Santana season kind of mixed in there.
Yeah, he made some starts the one year, and then remember they were going to put him back in the bullpen that next year, and then they brought him back up to be in the bullpen. I can tell you one thing though, they talk about this bullpen. That bullpen when you had Rincon on steroids, you had Santana in it for a while. You had Santana in it for a while. You had
J.C. Romero.
J.C. Romero.
Was he on steroids too?
He was on steroids. Yeah. He got
popped. He had 161 that year or something, right? And he had pitched in 70 games. He was a horse. They had that bullpen back then. And Johan was in it for a while, right? Johan was in it for a while.
So 2006.
And Latroy Latroy could never pitch in a game when they had a lead because they went with these other guys after they moved Latroy out of the starting
Kenny
rotation.
Rogers in that 06 rotation too?
He was in the rotation.
Silva, Radke, Liriano, Bonzer, and Baker.
Okay, Bonds. That's right, Bonzer.
Those were the primary starters.
Well, Boof, yeah. Then Liriano got hurt, and Boof ended up pitching game 2 against Oakland. Anyway, yeah, back then. I mean, they've had this good of pitching, but maybe not this deep a rotation. But you weren't as 5-man reliant back then either. Yeah, that was back in the days when they might pass your 5th starter if they had an off day, so they could pitch the 4 guys that stay in rotation. We didn't worry about that. Some minor inconvenience like 280 innings back there or anything like that. So, but yeah, it's as I say, it's greatest combination ever. Pitch clock, good pitching, bad hitting. Those games just fly, man. If they hadn't gone extra innings yesterday, what would we been about 210?
It was 251 for 11.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I was believe it or not, I was at a lacrosse game. I was at a lacrosse game, high school lacrosse game that started at 7, and it was a race to see who was going to get finished first, the baseball game or the lacrosse game, and then they ended up going extra innings. So I wanted to see what it was. I'd never seen a lacrosse game. Before I died, I wanted to see a lacrosse game, and you don't have to watch them too long to figure out what they're trying to do. But what's funny is these parents who don't know anything about it, they're just like me. They don't know anything about it. They're complaining about the officials anyway. They got 3 guys.
I have a hot take, and then we got to go.
Yeah.
All right. If you have no emotional attachment to the teams, if you're just going to go watch a sporting event, lacrosse is more entertaining than soccer and hockey because they score goals.
Yeah,
the game ends 15-13, and there's action paying off.
It's much like hockey, though. I think more than any other sport, it's like hockey. Hey, Judd, Peter Angelo, they got to suspend him, right?
Oh yeah, for that on Draisaitl, yes.
God Almighty,
He'll get a
unbelievable!
game. He should get at least 2.
Should
You
get
can't
2.
assault. You
Unbelievable.
cannot assault one of the greatest players playing right now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you just hit him. I heard him after the game saying, "Well, they'll probably get fined." Are you kidding me? They can't let him get away with that. He almost took his head off.
If that was a fourth line guy, I would fine him. It's Draisaitl. He's one of the best players left. You can't lose him.
Neck with a stick from 10 feet away.
I don't care. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm with you. I'm with you, Pat.
All right, Pat, we'll see you tomorrow. We'll break down the full Viking schedule game by game,
Yeah.
maybe half by half with Pat, actually, tomorrow. So, by the way, cruise the water in luxury on a brand new Bennington pontoon. These Reusse Unchained appearances presented by these glorious pontoons.
There's Pat right now. Phil.
That's him right
Pat,
there. Look at
Pat
him.
looking
Top
good.
down.
Look at
That's
the
for the YouTubers,
relaxation
yeah.
that Pat gets. I mean,
Look
look at how much different he looks on the Bennington.
Look at Pat's hands slowly grab that throttle.
Okay.
Power
All
Lodge. Okay, I made
Sorry.
it creepy.
Sorry.
Power Lodge and Miller Marine Power Lodge locations in Brainerd, Onamia, Ramsey, Miller Marine, and St. Cloud. I'll try not to make these creepy going
Do
forward.
that ever again.
PowerLodge.com and MillerMarine.com.